Good morning, friends. Today, let us move to the next very important concept called as the Convention on Biodiversity. In fact, this is a very important concept. After this one, we'll be seeing other conventions like climate change. But what do you mean by convention? Why this convention is very important? How it is being brought here? That means what? Today in this class we are going to see how the birth of how the birth of UNEP has taken place. Then at the point of time, what was the organization which is responsible for the climate related aspects. Then we also will be talking about the Brundtland report. These are the background of the conventions. Also, we'll be coming across the very important summit called as the Rio Earth Summit. All these things will be discussed very briefly, but today in this class, in this lecture, we will be discussing more about the Convention on Biodiversity. First, we will be seeing how the conventions have taken birth. Then we'll be going to different types of conventions like UNFCCC, how it has taken birth, then UNCCD. What do you mean by UNCCD? What is UNFCCC? UNCBD? This is called as UNCBD. Today our concept is UNCBD alone, but we'll be having a very brief introduction regarding what is the background regarding this Rio Summit, why it has taken place, and how it has given birth for some of the binding agreements. What do you mean by binding agreements, and how they will be facilitating the protection of environment and thereby sustainability. We'll be seeing all these things in this today's class. Let us start with the birth of United Nation Organization. United Nation Organization has taken birth during 1945, soon after the end of Second World War. Initially, this United Nation Organization is completely concentrating only on the political aspects and the economic aspects of the world countries. Never it talked about the environmental related aspect. Environment was not at all a subject for United Nations Organization. It was till 1970s. During 1970s, some development took place. It is all because of the best efforts made by two very great personalities by name Mr. Maurice Strong and Wangari Maathai. Because of the best efforts made by these two personalities, for the first time, environment became a concept to be discussed by the world countries. Till that point of time, there was no such discussion regarding the environment. It was during 5th June 1972. See the time, the date is very important. It was during 5th June 1972, for the first time in the country called as Sweden, the capital city called as Stockholm, a convention has taken place. Means what? A conference. Let us put like the word instead of convention, conference. Conference is nothing but a meeting. In 1972, 5th June, a conference took place at a place called as Stockholm, the capital city of Sweden. The name of the conference is called as United Nations Conference on Human Environment. This is the first name given for this conference. Here in this United Nations Conference on Human Environment, the environment of the world countries was discussed on a broader scale, and the people decided let there be a separate institution which will be talking more about environment of the world countries, because environment is quite changing rapidly during that point of time because of the human activities where the environment is quickly changing. Therefore, for the first time, because of the best efforts made by these two personalities, United Nations accepted to create a body called as United Nations Environmental Program. With this, the birth of environmental program has taken place. On 5th June 1972, UNUP United Nations Environment Program has taken birth. Therefore, right from then, the World Environment Day was celebrated on 5th June. The date is very, very important. The World Environment Day is on 5th June. Till this point of time, the only organization which is talking about the world environment was the organization called as WMO. It's called as World Meteorological Organization. But in the year 1987, a report on the sustainable development, where it is popularly called as Brundtland, Brundtland, Brundtland report was released with the title called as Our Common Future. This talked specifically about the sustainable development, how the sustainability should be there in the world countries. This is what the introduction for this one. Exactly after 20 years, there is a conference called as Rio Earth Summit. In the year 1992. Rio Earth Summit has taken place. The name of the organization, see, this summit is popularly called as the Earth Summit, but what is the original name? It's called as United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, where it is called as UNCED. A very, very important organization which has taken birth here, which is called as popularly called as Earth Summit, but the original name is called as United Nations Commission or Conference on. It's a conference on environment and development. United Nations Conference on Environment and Development. In this one, the outcomes, there are many outcomes. Out of these many outcomes, the very, very important outcomes which are legally binding on the parties, nothing but on the countries, legally binding agreements on the countries are: one, regarding the climate change. The first one is regarding the climate change. Regarding the climate, the name of the organization is called as United Nations Framework Convention for Climate Change. It's called as United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And the next binding agreement was on biodiversity, where the name of the convention called as United Nations Convention on Biodiversity. After 2 years, in the year 1992 it has taken birth, in the year 1990 it has taken birth. After 2 years, in the year 1994, there was a birth of another body which is for the desertification, for the regarding the problems of desertification, where the name of the organization is called as United Nations Convention for Combating Desertification. It's called as UNCCD, United Nations Convention on Combating Desertification. These are the three very important bodies which have taken birth during 1992, and one of the very important body where we are going to see in this class today is the Convention on Biodiversity. Apart from these three legally binding agreements, there is another agreement where the outcome of this UNCD is Agenda 21. It is Agenda 21. What is Agenda 21? Nothing but the agenda for the 21st century. What we need to do here in this 21st century is been given as Agenda 21. These are the burning issues where they needs to be addressed immediately. After the Rio Summit, let us move the other development, like again exactly after 20 years. 20 years, this called as Rio plus 20 summit has taken place at the same place called as the Rio de Janeiro of Brazil. What is this Rio? Rio is the important city present in the country called as Brazil. The name of the city is called as Rio de Janeiro. This is Rio de Janeiro. This is the name of the city where the summit has taken place. Exactly after again 20 years where the new summit has taken place, which is called as Rio plus 20. This summit, the name of the summit is called as the United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development. Altogether, 17 sustainable development goals are being drawn. Earlier to the sustainable development goals, there were 8 millennium development goals. These millennium development goals are being followed by the sustainable development goals. That means what? The precedent of sustainable development goals are the millennium development goals. These millennium development goals have been mixed into the new goals called as sustainable development goals, and altogether 17 such goals are being drafted, where the 17 goals with the targets of the goals are 17 with the targets of 169 targets. What is the target? The target is to achieve by 2030. What is the time period? The time period to achieve the sustainable development goal is 2030. Means what? The target for Rio plus 20 is 2030. Within this 2030, we need to attain all the 17 sustainable development goals. This is what the brief framework of what happened to the environment way back in 1972. Then what is the outcome of this one, where the outcome is the Earth Summit. In the Earth Summit, what are the very important developments? There are certain legally binding agreements. What are the three legally binding agreements? One is UNFCCC, the next one is called as UNCBD, the third one is called as UNCCD. Along with the other thing like Agenda 21, there are altogether some 27 such agreements. I am mentioning only a few. There are many agreements, but as of now, for our class, what is important is being given in a nutshell here. And exactly after 20 years of this Rio Summit, where there is another conference called as Rio plus 20, here the target is the Sustainable Development Goals. The name of the conference itself is called as United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development. See the three names of the conference. One in 1972, the name of the conference is called as United Nations Conference on Human Environment. United Nations Conference on Human Environment. The next one, in the Rio Earth Summit, the name of the conference is called as United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, whereas the conference in Rio plus 20 is United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development. These are the sustainable development goals where they are the preceders, successors for the Millennium Development Goals, along with the another concept that was included in the United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development Goal is the green economy. The other one is called as the green economy. Means what? What do you mean by green economy? We need to develop the we need to have the economic development, but not at the cost of degradation of the environment, because all the time the environmentalists believe that there is a very great tug between E versus E. What do you mean by E versus E? Economy versus ecology. The more the degradation of ecology takes place, more the economic development. This is what the tug where the environmentalists believe that there is a tug between E versus E. Means what? Environment versus economy. More the destruction of the environment, more the economic development. Less the destruction of environment, less the economic development. You can have a very great example here. Let us take the case of the highly developed countries like Japan, UK, USA, where the environment has been degraded to a maximum extent. Like, let us take the case of UK, where for the first time the acid rains took place here in the British. At the same time, whenever you are talking about the country like Japan, all the minerals that are present in the heart of the earth of this Japan region are being completely extracted. Therefore, more destruction is there. Because of more destruction, more economic development. On the other hand, let us see the environment that is present here in the African countries. There is no much degradation. The people lived in the ecological type of lifestyle, but the economy is still in the primitive mode. This is what the environment and the economy. There is a tug between E versus E. This is what the environmentalists believe. Having discussed the conventions, from where the conventions took birth, means what, from which summit the conventions came, where they are legally binding agreements. One of such legally binding agreement is the Convention on Biodiversity, where it's popularly called as CBD. Let us go in depth and detailed explanation regarding this Convention on Biodiversity. In this session, we'll be seeing not just the Convention on Biodiversity which took place in the world countries. The very important point here we are going to discuss here is Convention on Biodiversity and India. What is the India's response to this Convention on Biodiversity? In fact, we'll be having equal emphasis on the Convention on Biodiversity regarding the world. Also, we'll be having emphasis on the Convention on Biodiversity and its impacts and the developments in the Indian scenario. Let us have the brief history of this Convention on Biodiversity. The UNEP, nothing but United Nations Environmental Program, it has appointed a ad hoc working group. Means what? A temporary. It's not a permanent, it's a temporary. It's a temporary working group of experts on biological diversity in the year 1988 to explore the need for the International Convention on Biodiversity. The main objective of this ad hoc working group is to bring a bridge between the developed and the developing worlds. And at the same time, it emphasizes on the innovations made by the local people. These are the two very important objectives of this ad hoc committee. In 1991, this temporary working group was renamed as Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee. It prepared the draft, that is nothing but the text on the Convention on Biodiversity, which was accepted initially in the Nairobi conference. Later, this very text was being placed in the UNCED, nothing but in the Rio Earth Summit, which took place in the year 1992, 5th June. In this Rio Earth Summit, the convention accepted the means what the meeting of the world countries. All the world countries read this text, and finally they accepted to go for ratification. Ratification. What do you mean by ratification? Now let us pay attention on this ratification. Ratification is not mere signing the agreement. What do you mean by ratification? Ratification is not mere signing of the agreement by the head of the states. Say, for example, let me give the practical condition. Now, the Rio Earth Summit means what? That summit held at a place called as Brazil, in the country called as Brazil, at a place called as Rio. Now, the Indian representative, maybe the Prime Minister or the Ministry of External Affairs, these people might have attended the meeting. Those people who attended the meeting, if they sign the agreement, where earlier to these conventions, where the signatory of signature of these people is more than sufficient. Now, in this Rio Summit, the process of ratification was introduced. Means what? Those persons who are attending the meeting, if they sign, is not a valid document. In fact, the agreement means what? The proposal kept in this Rio Summit needs to be brought to the domestic country. Means what? To the respective countries. Like in the case of India, where these people, the Prime Minister or the External Affairs Minister, needs to bring this document back to India, needs to be submitted in the parliament. The parliament of the country needs to discuss this agreement elaborately, and finally, on the advice of Council of Ministers, the Prime Minister, nothing but the head of the executive, has to sign this one, and again needs to submit back to the CBD, nothing but Convention on Biodiversity. Such a process is called as ratification. Means what? Earlier to this Earth Summit, the personalities who are representing the country will be signing there and then itself, but a complex process of ratification was introduced here in the year 1992. What that complex process of ratification says, we need to bring this very document, instead of signing there itself, we need to bring back this document to the domestic country and needs to be submitted in the parliament, and the parliament has to discuss the bill, and this has to be approved by the Council of Ministers. In turn, the Prime Minister will be signing. In the capacity of the head of the executive, he will be signing and he will be submitting again to the convention. This is the process called as the ratification process. The objectives of the Convention on Biodiversity. The Convention on Biodiversity is built on three objectives. The very important objectives are: one, to conserve the biodiversity. The first and foremost objective is to conserve the biodiversity. The conservation of biodiversity itself is a very important task for the convention. The next one is called as the sustainable use of components of biodiversity. The third one is called as the fair and equitable sharing of the benefit arising out of the utilization of genetic resources. These are the three very important objectives of Convention on Biodiversity. Let us see the first one, the conservation of biodiversity. What do you mean by the conservation of biodiversity? Nothing but the protection of different varieties of life forms on the surface of the earth. This protection can be done because of two important strategies. One is called as ex situ strategy and the one is called as in situ strategy. What do you mean by ex situ strategy? external the situation means what? External the site. Suppose if this is a site where the life is present, life means what? Maybe a tree or maybe a animal is present here in this region. Now this very environment that is present around the species is not conducive for the sustainable development of this organism, then this very species is being lifted out from the natural habitation and carefully protected in the controlled environment, carefully kept and protected in the controlled environment. Such strategy is called as ex situ strategy. This includes the gene banks, artificial seed banks, the zoos are nothing but the zoological gardens or even aquariums. Whereas the another strategy is called as in situ means what? Wherever the species is living, wherever the species is living, there itself the protection of the species takes place, which is called as within the site. On site only the species needs to be protected. This includes the very important one called as sacred groves. What is a sacred grove? Sacred grove is a area, suppose if this is the area where the local communities who are present here, never they will be allowing anyone into this region, thereby these people, the local people, they will be protecting entire life that is present within this region. It's called as sacred grove. The next one is called as the wildlife sanctuaries. The third one, national parks. The fourth one is called as biosphere reserves. These are the very important strategies where they are come under the in situ techniques of conservation. The next one, the next objective is called as the sustainable use of components of biodiversity. What that it means? What do you mean by the sustainable use of components of biodiversity? Nothing but suppose, let me explain with the help of an example. Suppose if there is a tree, this tree, the tree part, maybe this part, maybe the leaves or the branches or the stem or maybe the bark of this tree. If this tree part is very much useful for the manufacturing of a medicine, then the researcher identifies this particular part and develops the medicine which is helpful for the humankind. If the researcher has not identified this very particular species, then the species of is of no use. Then the government needs to step in and there must be a very great cooperation between the government and the private organizations or maybe the research development so that the very species can be utilized on a sustainable manner for the benefit of humankind. This is the second objective. The third objective is called as the fair and equitable sharing of the benefits. What do you mean by the fair and the equitable sharing of the benefit? Now, where do you find the sharing? Now listen, the same case. This is the tree which is being protected by the local people. Maybe the local people are present here. The local people, right from times immemorial, where these people has protected this very tree. Had these people had not protected this tree, today this very tree may not be useful for the manufacturing of the medicine. Therefore, these local people needs to be given certain share in the profit because they are the protectors of these genetical resources. This is what called as the fair and equitable sharing of the benefits arising from the utilization of the genetic resources. These are the three very important objectives of Convention on Biodiversity. Let us move to some of the important convention bodies. Like the first one is called as COP, nothing but Conference of Parties. This Conference of Parties is the governing body. This is the basic governing body. This is the governing body. It is entrusted with the job of conducting the meetings regularly. The meetings need to be conducted regularly. Who has to invite the world countries to the meeting or to the summits? It is the COP. As on today, the CBD has conducted 14 such meetings. Means what? COP 14 was completed. The next summit called as the COP 15, which is a very very important summit to be held in Kunming, China, where it is planned to conduct the meeting is in the Yunnan province of China, and the name of the city is called as Kunming. This is going to be the very important summit because the global framework representing the global plan to halt the alarming trends in the state of nature are being planned. This conference is going to take place in October 2020, and the theme of this conference is the ecological civilization. This point is very very important for the UPSC PT part. This may be a direct question. The proposed meeting in the year 2020 October at Kunming, the Yunnan province of China. What is the theme of this conference? This is called as the COP 15 conference theme. The theme is called as the ecological civilization. What do you mean by ecological civilization? Leading the ecological type of lifestyle. What do you mean by ecological type of lifestyle? Without degrading the environment, living in a symbiotic relation with the nature, where the theme is ecological civilization, building a shared future for all life on earth. What that it means? Building a shared future for all life on earth means what? Giving equal status to all the creatures that are present on the surface of the earth. It is because of human where we people have exploited the other species indiscriminately. Because of this one, today we are feeling the heat of this one in the form of the COVID-19. This is the argument of the environmentalist right now. The COVID 19 disease is a product of not giving equal status for all the species on the surface of the earth. This is an important meeting. It's supposed to held in October 2020, but because of this COVID 19, the news regarding this one is been the news regarding the conducting of the meeting is kept in abeyance. There was no discussion, there is no postponement or even the preponement of the meeting. Nothing was being discussed. They are still waiting and they are watching the circumstances whether they are in a position to conduct the meeting or not. This is about the COP 15. COP 15 is a very important meeting where it is going to bring the framework for the post 2020. Means what needs to be done after 2020 is being decided, will be decided in this COP 15. This is going to be a big summit, but unfortunately is being stopped without any hope in the future where the meeting is going to held in October 2020 or not. In the COP 15 at Kunming in China, the great emphasis will be on the role of indigenous people and local communities, where it is given as indigenous people and local communities. This is going to be a big bit in the UPSC preliminary part 2020. What do you mean by IPLC? Nothing but indigenous people and local communities. How the indigenous people are going to protect the environment, and the local communities are protecting the ecology of that region. This is thereby protecting the entire biodiversity of the nature. Means what? How we need to lead the life. The lifestyle needs to be ecological in nature. This is the emphasis. The emphasis will be on the role of indigenous people and local communities.